Insurance doesn't have to be a headache. Hodinkee Insurance is the fastest and easiest way to protect the watches you love. So, what are you waiting for? Sign up today.
Do you want to wear your watch? Huh? Do you want to just look at it and not wear it? In which case, it's a beautiful corpse, embalmed, as it were, in a timeless state, marmoreal and useless.
Hey Hodinkee, once and for all, are winders a good idea, or do they stress the mechanism?
That's a very interesting question, and the answer to your question is yes to both. They are a good idea. They can be a very good idea. Stress the mechanism is a little bit of a pejorative way of framing what an automatic winder does. So automatic winders are typically calibrated to a certain number of rotations per day in order to maintain a certain minimum level of power reserve in the movement. An automatic winding system, like any other machine, undergoes wear and tear when it operates. So yeah, I mean, if you own a car, you can have a situation where there's absolutely no wear and tear and a minimum need for maintenance, but that means never driving the car. With a watch, you can have a situation where there's never going to be any wear and tear on the bearings in the automatic winding system and the reversers in the automatic winding system and the mainspring from being wound up and wound down and wound up and wound down. But that situation is called not using the watch. The reason that you might want to have a winder, you want to be able to grab and go a watch without having to wind it and reset it every morning. There are certain kinds of watches where it's very nice to have them on a winder because it could be laborious to reset them. Perpetual calendars are sort of a classic case in point. And I'm a big fan of the convenience of winders. And yes, it is true that you get wear and tear on the movement when you have the movement on an automatic winder, but you get wear and tear on the movement when you wear the watch as well. So it's really a question of, do you want to buy yourself a little bit of extra peace of mind by having the watch be completely inert when you're not wearing it, in which case no wear is taking place whatsoever, but you're going to have to reset the watch when you pick it up? Or do you want the added convenience of just being able to take a watch off a winder and put it on right away without having to reset it and without having to reset the calendar indications? In which case you accept the fact that the watch is getting about as much wear and tear as it would get if you were wearing it every day, which is pretty much what it's probably been designed to do anyway.
Hey Hodinkee, aesthetically speaking, what is the most beautiful time of day? For reasons I can't explain, I think the hands at 7:15, 8:20, and 8:50 are all more handsome than the classic 10:10.
I think 10 past 10 is popular with watch brands and in watch photography for a number of reasons. I mean, it's by far the single biggest visual cliche in watch photography. Having the hands at 10 past 10, it does provide a certain kind of slightly, or maybe even more overtly, anthropomorphic quality to a watch face. It makes a watch face look a little bit like a face. If a face had, two extremely elongated eye sockets branching out from the nose all the way to the edge of the skull that were narrow slits. The other reason that there tends to be a lot of use of the 10 past 10 setting in watch photography is because the hands in that position, number one, they look balanced, and number two, they don't obscure any other parts of the dial. So they don't obscure the date window, they don't obscure the brand logo, they don't obscure the verbiage at the bottom. They overall give the watch a very balanced appearance. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only aesthetically appealing position possible for the watch hands. I think watch hands look the most appealing when there's a certain degree of separation. I mean, when I do watch photography, the only situation where the position of the hands really bothers me is if they're too close to each other. I mean, if you're taking a picture of a watch and the minute hand and the hour hand are either actually superimposed or too close to each other, that looks a little bit like the photographer wasn't really thinking about how the watch looks. Other than that, hey, if 850 is your favorite position, 850 is your favorite position, and there's absolutely nobody who can tell you you are wrong. I mean, the old saying, there's no arguing with taste.
Hey Hodinkee, Grand Seiko's spring drive is such a marvelous movement. Why don't the Swiss make something like that?
So this is a question about which there is a great deal of acrimonious debate when the subject comes up at all among people who know anything about the question. Because the truth is, the Swiss did actually explore the idea of having a watch with a mainspring and a conventional going train that leads to a generator that generates power that drives a quartz timing package, has hands which move smoothly because they're attached to the smoothly rotating gears of the gear train rather than a stepper motor. The reason in a conventional quartz watch you see the hand jump in 1 second increments is because the stepper motor and the timing package are put together in such a way that the hands jump every time 1 second's worth of oscillations from the quartz oscillator have accumulated. So this goes all the way back to the 1970s, 1972, 1973. Grand Seiko actually began exploring the possibility of creating such a watch. It was a very, very long development process. It took several decades, and getting the mechanism small enough and efficient enough for it to work at all was a huge, huge challenge, because you're trying to get the generator to generate as much electricity as possible, and it's a minute generator. So the watch has to have extremely low power consumption. And Seiko, which has the resources to actually make its own integrated circuits, was able to develop a low enough power consumption chip that spring drive became possible. There are Swiss patents associated with something that is essentially spring drive dating from the early 1970s. They never did anything with it. A few years back, Piaget came out with a watch that was essentially a spring drive watch, and I thought it was a very interesting thing to do, but it's the only version of that watch which, as to my knowledge, ever made it to production in Switzerland. Spring drive today is, I think, pretty irrevocably a technology that Grand Seiko owns. A lot of the time you see great ideas coming up in several different places at more or less the same time.
Hey Hodinkee, if you could have a watch company make a model for you, like a Jack Forster signature watch, what details and features, like materials and complications, would you want?
I would like it to be round. There are a lot of rectangular watches that I love, but if I'm like, my dream watch it's probably round, not rectangular. The one feature that I would most love for a watch that I commission for myself to have is some combination of an acoustic complication and an astronomical complication. So at the base level, I'd like it to be a minute repeater grand sonnerie, just because I love chiming complications. For the entire time I've been writing about watches, they've been completely out of reach for me economically, which just makes them more attractive. But what I don't think anyone has ever done is tie an acoustic indication of the time to an astronomical indication. What I've dreamed of for many, many years is having a perpetual calendar watch with an indication of the date of Easter, which chimes at dawn on the date of Easter on your location. And it's a fascinating problem because the date of Easter does follow a cycle, which means theoretically you can program it into a watch, but the cycle is over 5 million years, as opposed to the 4 years for a perpetual calendar, which is already pretty demanding. So building such a watch, it's not impossible. There have actually been watches and clocks built in modern times that have come somewhat close. Konstantin Chaikin did a Orthodox calendar indication of Easter, but so far nobody's done anything with the movable feast of Easter in a wristwatch, except for Patek Philippe in the Caliber 89, but that's not really a true indication of the date of Easter because it requires a program wheel, and after about 30 years you need to just have a new program wheel installed. Somewhat more practical to do, and I think something that I would spend a lot of money, I would have to spend a lot of money to get it done, would be a watch with a sunrise and sunset indication, so let's say it's a grand sonnerie and a minute repeater. And let's say it chimes on 3 gongs. So at the moment of sunrise at your location, the watch chimes an ascending chime, ding, 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 at dawn, and at sunset chimes a descending triplet of tones, ding, ding, ding. And I just think that would be kind of sexy. Well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Really, really fantastic to have these questions. I hope my answers to your questions, especially the one about the chiming complication, really struck a chord with some of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And that's the show. We'll see you next time.